if we go on to the fifth one, who did you have as your fifth?
It was SK for me.
Oh, that was SK for you, right?
Yeah.
I actually have Fnatic at fifth. So, spoiler, one, I am a classic Fnatic hater. There's always that. Shade that in, everyone. Just mark that in. Grain of salt, as usual. Everyone take the grain of salt. But then secondly, the other reason why is this. So if people don't know, Fnatic basically just kept the same team, but let go of Trimby and then signed Jun, who, if people remember, used to play in the LCK. He was a Korean support player. So my problem is here. There's two factors to this one, Zabatine, which is, I'm not hating on Fnatic last year, but you mentioned it already. Unfortunately, if you are a team like these three teams I'm about to list, if you are BDS, XL, Fnatic, you can already see the pattern here, you only had those placings because the rest of the league was shit except G2. Because, like, the joke is, that's it. Like, aside from that, it was Mad Lions. That's it. Like, there's no one else. Like, as far as I think a lot of teams, because notice all those teams were in finals. You can't take that roster and think it'll do the same this year. The whole league's changed. So my issue is, people forget this. When they made the season finals, that was actually when Wonder was standing in instead of Oscarinin. So actually, with this lineup with Oscarinin, I just didn't see that many games I thought were great. I know at Worlds they did have a tough group because they had to play, it's 3 Asian teams and they would have had to beat one of them, which is a tough ask for anyone in my opinion. But I also thought the problem was, I've never ever seen all the players in this team play well at the same time. Obviously, I'm ignoring that they brought a different support. Like, even though it's been a belabored point, I, as far as I know, I'll just say the truth of what I know from behind the scenes. The only reason Razork and Humanoid still play League of Legends together for now a third year is because both of them had enormous salaries and contracts right before esports winter. And so nobody has the money, or by the way, the inclination to want to just break the bank for Humanoid, who hasn't looked like Mad Lions Humanoid. Like, I'm sorry, even if we all, behind the scenes, everyone says the same thing you said earlier. He can be a really skilled player. When he's on his game, he clearly has talent. But you see in the games, it's like, for me, flip a coin. Half the games he doesn't show up and he doesn't do that shit in the games. And then secondly, I've never seen him synergize with Razork. Razork individually, by the way, looks really good. I actually think they really should, for the sake of their careers, go to different teams. I think they both can be very good players. Then you look at the rest of it. The Oscarinin guy, he's still just a rookie for me. He hasn't played a full year. Give him a chance. He had some games, he showed me something. Noah looked good, but I have to say, man, it felt like he never looked as good as those first 2 weeks, though. Those first 2 weeks, he looked fucking sick, mate. And then after that, I actually feel like, I don't know if it's champion pool or what it was, he looked a lot more hesitant after that. Before that, I was like, holy shit, that hype was real. Maybe he is like the sleeper best ADC. Like, if you play around him, he just carries the game. And then I just felt like the player I saw go to Worlds in the finals and stuff was just a bit more lackluster, you know. It wasn't like a stud carry all the time. And so I just don't know, like, how the Jun guy is going to work. I don't know what the fuck. This team, that's why I've got them fifth. Like, I don't hate on them. There's a world they could come like third or something, but I just kind of have them in them almost just above average. There you go, just above average. I have them fifth. Where you at on Fnatic? It sounds like you're going to put them like second or something, right? You're going to go crazy.
I put them third.
Third.
I put them third. For mostly the same reasons as you. I feel like Humanoids and Razork never connected ever. I don't think it is even to be called a mid jungle. It's a mid and a jungle that sometimes play together.
Yes.
I think that Razork and Trimby didn't connect either. It was better with Trimby, but nothing anywhere close to like what I call like, if you look at Mikix and Yike, you have a jungle support. They are everywhere around the map. They are dropping wards into your jungle. They're contesting your camps. It feels very hard to play against them. If you see Yike missing on the map and you don't know what the jungle is, he's with the jungle and you're scared. This never happens with Fnatic. It's a lot of band-aid situation that ended up being good for Fnatic last year, and I don't see it like just happening this year, especially with just the addition of a Korean support that has to connect with Razork and Humanoid. And it is winter split for Humanoid, meaning that you have the weakest version of Humanoid because everybody knows like on his A game he's the best. I actually think he's better than even Caps when he's on his game, but everybody agrees pretty much with like the statement that he's not on his best that often. And then you have Oscarinin that to me is still a downgrade to Wunder.
Yep.
I agree with you, but I'm exactly aligned with you on that. It's like, just let the kid play and we'll see. Like, I want to see how he plays. But Fnatic is a threat. Everybody's overrating them because they've seen Noah and Jun play in-house and they've been smashing every other dual lane in-house. But people don't understand that in-house is literally just throwing bodies during Christmas.
Yes.
And just limit testing 24/7 has nothing to do with the real League of Legends or the competitive one, at least. And it doesn't give us any perspective on how well these players are going to perform. Maybe the best duo lane is going to be Mad's one and everybody's going to be surprised. For all these reasons, I think Fnatic on the paper is a threat, but has no coherence within it. So I see them winning most of their games just based on the fact that they have better players. And there is always a possibility that Humanoid picks Azir, logs the mid lane, goes to bot, gets one dive on the 2 Koreans, and then they just play out of that. And they should win games. But is it a team that I would be defining as a threat for G2 or contender for G2? Not yet.
I'll tell you a reason as well that I'm a bit skeptical, especially about this lineup for this year, which is one of the things, because by the way, I mean, you'll see with some of the other content that'll come out soon. One thing I'm trying to do is, you know, when I sometimes do like actually investigative like exposes of like scumbags and esports, I'm actually trying to do that, but about players. Look, obviously I'm not exposing them as scumbags, but I mean, when there's a player that's like an enigma, like a Humanoid, I'm going to go and use like investigative journalist techniques and try and find out like from a bunch of ex-coaches and teammates, like, what's the deal with this guy? Like, you know, how does he play or what does he want to do? And in doing so, I've already started doing the groundwork of that for this Humanoid one, basically. And I can tell you, one of the things that a bunch of his teammates say, 2 main factors about this guy that made me really worried about this specific roster is, one, they tell me that he is really smart about the game, but not in like a way where it makes him like a leader necessarily, as in like he knows what he thinks you should do and you should know what you should do, but he might not like necessarily like explain to you why. And if you don't get it, he might just sort of be like, this guy's an idiot, and then just sort of dismiss you. And then the other thing is, I've heard that like when he, in light of this like sort of spicy nature, that he sort of, if he thinks you don't get like his style of play or you don't sort of understand how he thinks the game should be played, he'll just sort of give up on you, right? My obvious concern there is, one, Razork's still there, and then both the bot laners are Koreans. Like, there's a world where, like, all I'm saying, guys, is I don't know how the comms are going to work in this team. Like, maybe Humanoid, by the way, get sick of it all, just plays League of Legends is awesome in mid lane. That'll do it. That'll get you a lot of wins. But if there's going to be any of these issues, like, this is another team where, I don't know, maybe it can fall apart, because the other problem as well is, I don't know Nightshare, the brother of Freeze, who was the coach. Like, I don't know the coaching staff as well in this team. Like, the Heaver guy, when he was there, I don't even know if he's still there. He seems like he's a pretty good strategic coach, but I feel like this could be a team again where, like, the head coach probably has a lot of fucking work to do with this team to like create the synergy in the system and how we're going to play and how we're going to communicate and what the shot calling setup is. I don't know, mate. I just feel like the intangibles might be a bit wacky in this one for me.
Yeah, it's a very hard team to rate overall. There is no clear starting point. You cannot start with the Korean duo lane. You cannot start with Razor.
Yes,
Razor's gonna have good showing as well. Like, he plays Poppy, and you feel like he's the carry of the team. So Razor, for me, should have played with Larson or or come back with VTO at some point. I think that would have made like a lot of sense. He's such a good jungle, man.
By the way, as an aside, don't you get triggered by that too? I know it'll sound weird because it sounds like I'm just being indulgent, but like, I hate seeing really top players sort of like waste their potential, because I thought the same thing this whole time Razork's been in Fnatic. It's like, mate, when he has his carry games, he looks like the best EU jungler. Like, his hands are ridiculous. Like, why don't we not just put this guy in a different team? Like, the amount of players we've listed in this episode so far who essentially could be like all LEC, but they're just in the wrong team or with the wrong teammate. It's mad, isn't it?
No, it's crazy. I mean, when you think about Wunder that doesn't play on par with what he should do, Humanoid that plays on and off, when you think about Trimby that doesn't play, Razor that's stuck with Humanoid who doesn't play with, Larson that now has to play with a team that's definitely on subpar with the level he has. When you look at the track record of VTO, spending 2 years waiting for his time in Misfits and then being thrown in the XL fire pit and not being able to show, being saved by Heretics and then being thrown again into Vitality that we haven't mentioned. When you look, like, there is the story, the history of LEC the last 3 years and why people keep asking me and probably asking you, why aren't we relevant on the international stage? The very reason is this.
Yes.
The players that should play together never get to play together.
Yes.
They just don't. Make me, Elioya, play with a mid laner that want to play for him. Make Bo play with Niski. Make Humanoid play with extremely strong side lanes and a jungle that has 200. Like, these players do exist and they can play together, but because of the musical chair of the off-season, the asymmetry of information and the inflated price and the esport winter, nobody can afford to assemble these teams.
Yes. Put it this way, my analogy would be this, Sabatine. You know, there's a famous thing they always say. It's actually in every American election. People always see the two main candidates and they go, are these the two best candidates that America could produce? It's like, no, that's not the way the political system works. Like, you do know, like, the parties, like, sort of select who they care about. It's who has money behind it. Essentially, the point is, no, obviously there's loads of people could be a brilliant leader in America. They're just either not running for president or they wouldn't be able to win the seat, right? So similarly, I do feel like people make the mistake that you're referring to, which is when Worlds happens, they act like the region got together and were like, right, let's put together 4 awesome teams to prove how good Europe is. It's like, no, we did a whole domestic league where we compete against each other, and in the off season we're all trying to nick players from each other and get, like, the joke is we've spread the talent out. That's the problem. Whereas, like, I'll give you the obvious example. You know, when you see those little teams like bloody Detonation Focus Me from Japan, they just get all the best players from that fucking country, make a super team, and then they have a shot at getting an upset. Like, if they spread all the talent out, you'd never heard of any of these teams. They'd do nothing. So I think the saddest thing is, I'm with you, we could make some banger teams like that. That's why the NRG thing really stung me, Zabatine, because NA was laughing and it's like, bro, this might be the worst Europe's ever been and you're fucking bragging. Like, aside from G2, we were never telling you any of these teams were going to make it. We all knew they were fucking toast.
Do you think that the T1 situation could have happened in Europe?
To just run back a lineup again?
Yeah, I think that any observer of the league and any rumor I've heard for any specialist in the field we're expecting T1 to not play together next year. I haven't heard any single person with a sane mind observing T1 is like, they're just gonna pay for the same roster next year. Meaning that there has been a huge effort on every single part involved in the re-signing of the whole roster. Every single piece, right? It's not just T1 and the play. No, it's T1, the players, the agent, the whole industry in Korea has had to make some changes and some arrangement for it to exist. Do you think it's something that could be possible if tomorrow, let's assume G2 goes runner-up in Worlds? Don't you think do you think that's something? I mean, G2 kept their roster, but do you think that's something that we could see in Europe? Like, if G2 win Worlds, do you think they're not gonna get insane contracts from NA and just?
Oh no, here's my problem. I think there's 2 factors. So one is the latter one you just mentioned, which is that it's actually just the nature. This is, by the way, one of the areas I think always that culture will divide the East and the West. In the East, if people don't know, they even have an element baked into their teams where, for example, say Faker left T1. Dude, I'll tell you one thing right now, 17. I predict Faker will never leave T1. He might retire, but he'll never leave T1. I'll tell you why. Because every fan will treat him like a traitor. Even if, by the way, he's been more than loyal. He's won them all the fucking cups. He's played a million years. He could have had more salary. To a Westerner, if you think about how our sports work, he'd be totally justified. If Mbappe wants to go to the fucking Barcelona, everyone would say, do it, get the contract. You don't owe anything to Paris Saint-Germain. Yeah, exactly. Everyone would tell you in the West, be individualistic, do it. In Asia, first of all, they have way more of an idea of I belong to this team, I'm loyal. So I think in the West, the problem is all the orgs would come like you're saying. And if G2 won Worlds, someone would just come and make pick a random player, Yike or fucking Mickey. Someone would just give him an insane offer that probably doesn't even make sense for G2.
Liquid comes on the table.
And then he'd leave and that's gone. And then the other angle is, I also get the feeling that sadly, because of the success of that G2, the really good G2s years ago, you'll know this, everyone behind the scenes has heard that stupid thing they had in G2, which was the reason it didn't work the 3rd year though, was you've got to always change a few pieces, because if you keep people, they become stale or something. I can see what they mean. I would agree certain lineups that applies to, but I've heard loads of teams, now that's their meta, they believe you have to sort of change a player every year, or that if you keep the same 5, they'll just decay or whatever. Whereas the point you're making, I would agree with actually, is that T1 lineup essentially earned a run back. I don't personally think they'll do it and be as good, but they earned another crack at it to see if they can sort of keep it going. But no, I actually think in the West, sadly, I feel like people have gone away from that approach. The best example ever for me, by the way, is I still to this day can't believe Rogue changed that lineup with Odoamne. Mate, after they won the split and top 8 worlds, you definitely give it one. You run it back for one more split at least, if not the whole year. That was a killer, wasn't it? That one crushed me.
And they actually didn't retain their veteran. That's
mad,
to me was the most. It's okay, you wanted to change a jungle, right? Okay, you say Malrang is not gonna go for another year. We're just gonna get a local one. They could have gotten Edioya or Yak. Would have made a lot of sense. It's we just want to invest local to be long-term winners because we know Koreans go. And usually after some years, they want to go back to their country, which, is very legitimate. No. They actually went, we're just going to upgrade. we have to gamble to be better, to be more. And instead of saying we're going to refine our craft with the existing tools we have, because they're probably not all the sharpest blade at the same time.
Sure.
They're like, oh no, we need a different blade. Like it's just not auto. It has to be Ziganda. And he went to Ashes. And I was so upset because, yeah, I feel like you shouldn't change. Like we haven't spoken about G2. I'm pretty sure like it's your first and it's my first and it's probably everybody's first. Thanks G2 for not overreacting to too bad international showing, but trusting all the process. There is plenty of things to say about the G2 situation. We could probably make a whole podcast of like, how do you trust yourself in applying your win condition where you are in the underdog as a Westerner playing against the Asian teams. But at least they stick to their guns and then say, okay, let's give it a second shot and we'll see if it actually can change. I wish more teams were doing that. Like overall, before even disclosing the remaining teams, I feel like there has been too many shuffles in Europe already.
Yes. Oh, that was the worst part of the
like
off-season, mate. It's like, that's the other thing I also hate. People will ignore this, but I actually think that also limits all the orgs, because how do you build a fan base if the player that I'm a fan of leaves and goes to another team? If that happens, spoiler, I'm now a fan of the other team, not your team. Like, I don't just stay with you. So, like, by the way, I'll give you an obvious example. Look, there's an obvious bias as to what you might agree. But to me, the craziest move wasn't even that Mad Lions let Mac go. It's that they let Nisqy go. Bro, if you have Nisqy, why would you ever let him go? He should have been the face of your team with Elyoy. I'd say that I'd make both of them sort of like the face and I'd just build around them. Like, you never let a player like that go. Like, that's just silliness, boys. Come on.
Esports is young, man. That's it. Like if you watch a lot of team sports, you know, from volleyball to to handball to soccer or American football or the NBA, is like if you have the chance to have two key players like this, just make them happy. And if they don't work well together, you choose the one you want to keep.
Yes.
But I feel like leaving, like they had three Western class people in the team. They had Nisqy, they had Mac, and they had Elyoya. You can't leave two at the same time. I think it's so detrimental to your organization.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.